Go. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming along to the time management workshop this afternoon. My name is Kim Lombard, and I'm one of our occupational therapists who work as part of the Access and Lifelong Learning Centre. As I said, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day today to come attend this workshop. As I said, this workshop is being recorded, so you can access it on the Brightspace module at any time after the session today. And also, if you have any questions or have any comments about anything, please feel free to either obviously unmute yourself if you're comfortable to do that, or put them into the chat. The chat won't be recorded as part of the recording. Also, at the very end of the workshop, I'll stop recording before the questions or an opportunity to ask questions if you guys have any in particular. So let's start into it now. So the session outline then, so the few things we're going to look at is firstly, why we should manage our time at all. Secondly is looking at kind of 3 steps to productive time management. And this involves firstly, long-term semester planning. Secondly, short-term weekly and daily planning. And then the third aspect is goal setting as well. And then I just put in a few other tips as well that might be useful for you guys. So why should we manage our time? Can anyone put into, even in the chat, can you give me some reasons about, why we should manage our time at all in college, I suppose? Anyone feel free to put anything into the chat there. Not coming in just yet, but that's okay. So obviously there's a couple of maybe reasons why we might need to manage our time. Some of them might spring to mind already. So for example, we might need to manage our college commitments. So this may be things such as managing deadlines, making sure that we're getting to our lectures on time, going to our exams, and so on and so forth. But there's other things and other reasons outside of college that need us or are appropriate for us to manage our time for. So the first one is balancing our college work with life and other commitments that we may have outside of our role of being a UCD student. So this might include, let's say, if you have a job, if you have family commitments at home, and if you play any sports or engage in any other extracurricular activities, and also such as engaging in appointments, going to the dentist or the doctor or whatever appointments that you may need to go to just as our regular kind of day-to-day stuff. Also to take care of ourselves. So it is important, time management isn't all just about this kind of traditional sense of productivity and getting our work done, but it's also important for us to take care of ourselves. So for example, making sure we have enough time to eat good food and making enough time to have a sufficient amount of sleep each night, so on and so forth. And then also managing stress and feelings of being overwhelmed. So, if we are able to manage our time more effectively, it can really help reduce those levels of stress and feelings of being overwhelmed, especially as we come towards, let's say, midterm assignments or towards the end of the semester for bigger deadlines or exams. And then also one of the most important things is also ensuring that we get to do fun things as well in our routine. And, it's very important that we are dedicating time to have fun and take time out and take a break when it's necessary so that we can productively relax in order to productively do our work when we come back into college. So how do you guys manage your time? Just have a think about, just for a minute, how are you managing your time at the moment? Are you managing your time? And by that I mean, are you using a calendar? Are you using a diary? Are you using a notebook to write everything down? Are you trying to keep everything in your head? What sort of things are you doing at the moment? And just have a think about, is it working for you? Or are you kind of finding that you have a system in place, but it may not actually be doing exactly what you need it to do? So for example, if you're taking everything down in a notebook, are you finding that there might be certain things that you might miss as time goes on and things like that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, as I said, the kind of 3-step strategy in order how to manage our time going forward. So the reason why I have a picture here of a silver filter is that when it comes to looking at productive time management, it's important to think about time management like a filter. So we filter things down from the kind of bigger, wider perspective and filter it slowly down into kind of the more nitty gritty hour by hour aspect of our time management. So the first bit, or the biggest kind of hole in the filter, is the long-term trimester planning. And this is looking at creating a bird's eye view of your overall trimester. So this is saying, right, let me look at the whole semester as a whole and see how things are kind of working, when are my kind of deadlines falling and things like that. Then we work on a little bit more, if we come further into the filter, we look more at a short-term weekly and daily planning exercise. And this is knowing what you should be doing and when you should be doing it. So for example, it's knowing when your lectures are, or where your tutorials are, and when an exam might be during a week, when the deadline is for a certain thing, or even just when your appointments are, or when, let's say, your sports activities are, or something like that. And then finally, goal setting as well. Goal setting is really around setting realistic goals and expectations based on the time that you have to work with. So it's not to forget that, unfortunately, when you come to college, unfortunately, we don't get given an extra, 6 hours a day to work everything out. Unfortunately, it would be great if we could. But actually, it's looking at ways, and goal setting is a very productive way of being able to manage the time a little bit more efficiently, so that you're getting your work done, but you're also feeling that you're being productive and meeting the goals that you need to meet. So the first one is long-term trimester planning. So there's a couple of resources that can be useful for this that will be put up on the Brightspace module as well. The first one is a module matrix sheet. And what this does is it allows you to outline the module demands for the trimester. Brightspace is absolutely brilliant for having all of the information for all of your modules down on it. But the only issue that I kind of find of Brightspace, the only limitation, is that there's no one place where all of the information to do with all of your modules is kept in the one kind of area. And this is what a module matrix sheet is. It's in order for you to identify what are the demands that you are going to have to manage this semester, and then how can we do that as well. Then the next resource is the long-term trimester planner. And this is for managing, putting in, let's say, your bigger deadlines or other big commitments that might take up really big chunks of time. So let's say if you're going away for a weekend, you'd put in that you're going away for a few days. If you have big family events like a wedding or something like that. So I'll explain the two of these to you guys now. So for example, this is just, an example of a module that's been put into the module matrix sheet. This is just one module, maybe out of maybe 5 or 6 that you might be doing. So let's say, for example, in module calculus, the breakdown of the assessment is there's attendance for 10%. You have to do weekly web works or bi-weekly web works for 15% of the grade. Your midterm exam is 25%, and then the final exam at the end of the trimester is 50%. So that's kind of the breakdown of the assessment. Then you can put in some additional information such as, attendance is that I have to attend all my classes and tutorials. The web works are bi-weekly online questions that start. And then the midterm will be covering weeks 1 to 4, and it's going to be a 50-minute test. And then my final exam is going to be a 2-hour exam. And then obviously you may not have the due date for everything right now, and that's totally fine because it's a little bit early days in some aspects to have the due dates, or let's say, for example, your exact exam timetable right now. But for anything that you might have due dates for, it's important to put that down here. So for example, obviously the attendance is just attending all of the classes. The bi-weekly online work questions, let's say they start in week 2. So it'll be week 2, week 4, week 6, week 8, so on and so forth. Let's say you find out that your midterm test is on the 9th of October, and then your Christmas exams are going to be it's going to be at the Christmas exam. So if you do this for each of your individual modules, it allows you to draw all of that information into the one place. And the nicest part about it is that when you start to be able to tick all these things off, and by the end of the trimester, everything will be ticked off by the end of it, which is a great sense of achievement to get. Then the next thing then, when you fill out the module matrix, is to then look at the long-term trimester planner. So this is just kind of an outline of a what's it called, kind of like a long-term trimester planner that has, the days Mondays to Sunday in columns, and then let's say week 1, week 2, week 3, so on and so forth in the rows, and then all the dates down on it, and that's relevant. And the point of this is for you to put in when those deadlines are. So for example, let's say for this particular student who had calculus, their calculus web work starts in week 2, as we see over here, it starts in week 2. So then it's also going to be in week 4, so on and so forth. They also put in that they have their maths midterm here as well on the 9th of October. And their classes started, let's say, on the 9th of September, something like that. They've also put in, as you can see here, that they've also put in, let's say that they're going on a hiking trip on that weekend here. So that means that, that is really going to impact their ability to be able to do some work, obviously, over that time for their maths midterm. So it allows them to kind of start planning in advance to say, okay, well, if I'm going to be away that weekend, I really would like to try have most of my revision done by, let's say, the week before or something like that. And then similarly, they can also see that they have a physics lab report the day after it. So this is what I'm trying to say, is that by doing a modular matrix and then putting everything into the long-term planner, you start to see the relationship between all of your deadlines. And that allows you to plan in advance for the weeks that are going to be busier than others. Some weeks you may not have any deadlines, and that's fine, but there might be weeks where, let's say, you have 3 or 4 deadlines at the same time, and it's better to know that in advance so that you can make adjustments for it, rather than having to make that adjustment well into the future or get a surprise for it. Perfect. So then coming on here, once you have kind of the bird's eye view of your semester done, and you know when all of your deadlines are generally sitting, like I said, sometimes you might not have specific deadlines for things that are much later in the semester. That's okay. Just maybe pop them down for, let's say, the start of the week or something, just to have them in at least. But the short-term, weekly and daily planning then, this is really looking at what you're supposed to be doing at any given moment, I suppose, during your day. So firstly, the resources. The first one here is the weekly planner. So a weekly planner is literally just an hour by hour overview of your week. So it's, Monday to Sunday, and it might be from, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. And I'll show you an example of it now in a second. But the other thing you could potentially use is your Google Calendar. So the benefit of using your Google Calendar is that your lecture timetable should already be, put into that Google Calendar already. So that you don't actually have to go and take a physical calendar and put it all in there as well. Some people do prefer a physical calendar though, and that's okay. How you access your Google Calendar is by going on to UCD Connect, and where you would usually access your email on UC Connect, you should go an icon or two over and you'll see the Google Calendar icon, and that's where you can get into your calendar there. And the benefit of this is that you can actually you can put your own events and different blocks of time into your Google Calendar and kind of make it your own there as well. So the secret to short-term planning, and this is the problem sometimes, is that students may say that, oh, I want to study 10 hours this week, or I want to study 20 hours this week, or something like that. And we base it a lot of the time on time spent studying, but actually, and we don't consider all of the other commitments that we have during our day. So the real big secret to short-term planning is firstly to incorporate all of your regular activities that you do during the day. So for example, incorporate your lectures, your commuting or your transport to college, any meals you might have, the sleeping times, any kind of training sessions or practices that you have on a regular basis, anything that's regular and happens pretty much on a weekly basis, put that in first. Then only after that point do you say, okay, what remains is your free time, and these are for the variable activities. So for example, for studying, to plan fun stuff in, to put appointments in that may not be held very frequently. And also it's important to schedule time for yourself. So this is what I'm trying to say is it's starting to identify the pockets of free time in your schedule to then start to figure out how to use them appropriately. So here's an example of a kind of a weekly planner. So as you can see, it says Monday to Sunday in the columns at the top. And then it says, let's say 8, 9, 10, 11, so on and so forth in the rows across. So it just allows you to kind of start inputting some of the information here. Now, the one thing I do want to say with this as a caveat is that This is not to try and plan out our time to the absolute minute about absolutely everything that can happen. And the reason why is because there's things that can really impact our schedules that we don't have full control over, and that's understandable. For example, let's say this morning when it was lashing rain outside and maybe the bus was late coming to get you or something like that, even though you were at the bus stop at the right time, it was 10 minutes late because of the rain or something like that. So it's important to have a little bit of flexibility in our timetables each day, just so that we appreciate those unpredictable aspects of life. But let's just say here as an example, so this student obviously has a lecture, let's say at 9 o'clock and at 10 o'clock. They have a lecture at 1 o'clock, and then they also have a tutorial at 2 o'clock. So that meant that they had kind of, let's say, like a 2-hour gap here. So they decided to put their lunch in there between 12 and 1. They also have to commute for an hour to get to college. So that's an hour of commuting in the morning and then an hour of commuting in the evening. They then also have a piano lesson at 4 o'clock at home. So they have to pop that in. And then they put in their dinner and things like that. So obviously, let's say, obviously this isn't the full day. This is just a snapshot of it. But let's say, so they've been able to identify an hour gap here that they might want to do a little bit of work in, or let's say there might be a society event like a coffee morning or something that they'd like to engage in. The point of it is to identify the free time and to plan using it, be it for something to do with your academic work or to do with something else like society events, or doing something fun for yourself or going for a run or something like that. The point of it is to start using that free time in a productive way, I suppose. And productive way can also mean taking a break. Like, that's okay, but it's just making sure that it's accounted for. So let's say, for example, obviously I haven't filled out the rest of this week here for the student just because it would be very, very busy on the screen. But let's say obviously that student had said on their long-term planner that they have a hiking trip. So that means that Saturday and Sunday is completely gone for them mainly. But they kind of do come back maybe mid-afternoon on a Sunday. So they might get, let's say, meal prepping done for the week, or they have to get their washing done before the week starts or something like that. Then also they've popped in that they have the dentist on a Wednesday at 5. So that might slot into their timetable for that day. And the point of this, like I said, is to just start to identify the free time slots that you have in your schedule. So goal setting then, and goal setting is really when you figure out your free slots and your free time, the goal setting is really around how to set kind of realistic plans and goals for that time that you have available to you. So this is the thing called SMART goal setting. And what SMART goal setting stands for is specific, measurable, attainable or action-oriented, relevant and realistic, and time-bound goals. And I'm going to explain each of these to you now. So to do it like a goal being specific, it needs to be, something that you can actually see or assess the outcome of it. So for example, if we just said, I'm going to work on my history module, there's probably so much stuff that you could do for that. So you need to be more specific about it. Is it, I'm going to read X reading for my history module? Am I going to plan out my essay for my history module? Things like that. So the point of it is to be more specific in the goal that you're trying to achieve. If we're more specific, then it means that it's easier to measure if we've met our goal or if we haven't. So for example, if we just say I'm going to work on my history module, what does that mean? How do we know that we've actually reached our goal and attained our goal? And whereas if we say, okay, I'm going to do X reading between 2 and 3 for my history module, at the end of, at 3 o'clock, if you got that reading done, then it means that you've met your goal. And that sense of achievement is great. And then attainable and action-oriented and relevant and realistic can really kind of play in together and kind of go hand in hand. So it is important, I suppose, to try and set realistic and attainable goals for ourselves, because if we set goals that are too far-fetched or too unrealistic, it really discourages us from setting more goals or trying to do our work, because we had too high an expectation of what we could do in, let's say, an hour time or something. So for example, let's say if you have an hour free between classes, you have to obviously consider that you have to get to the library or you have to get back to your class or whatever it is, but then also think about what can you realistically do within that amount of time. I don't expect students to be writing their full essay in an hour between classes. That's not what it is at all. But it's saying, okay, what one step can I take in this time between here, that would be achievable for me to do in that time. And if you're not sure how long something takes you to do, and I appreciate that kind of can change over time, but it can be good to kind of time yourself doing certain tasks, and not to kind of do it really, really quickly, but just do the task as normal and time yourself doing it. So for example, time how long it takes you to, when you wake up in the morning, getting your shower, get your breakfast, whatever it is, and out the door, how long does that realistically take you? Because when you have that time, then it means that you're able to build it into your schedule a lot better. And it means that you're actually given the appropriate time frame for how long it actually takes you to get ready. And similarly for your academic work, how long does it take you on average to get through a set of lecture notes for history or for calculus or whatever it is. And then lastly is time bound. With this, it's about how long will it take to reach your goal. So obviously you might have a longer term goal that might be a semester long goal, and you might have more specific individual goals that you are looking at on kind of like a minute kind of hour or even a half an hour basis, and kind of setting that time frame then can be useful so that you know when the time has passed to meet it. So I'll give you a few examples here. The first one here is, I will do well in calculus. So this is an example of a goal that's not SMART. And the reason for it is because what does well even mean? Does well mean that you pass the module, that you get a certain grade? Does it mean that you attend all your lectures? Unfortunately, it's too vague. It's not specific enough for us to know if we've reached our goal. Whereas let's say if we said, I will study 2 calculus chapters each week between weeks 7 and 10. That's a very SMART goal. And by that, I mean, it allows you to say, okay, I have 2 chapters of calculus I have to do each week. You sit down with your weekly timetable and you identify the times that you can, look at those 2 calculus chapters. And at the end of the week, if you've completed the 2 of them, then you've met your goal. That is as simple as that. And if you do it between weeks 7 and 10. And obviously, if you achieve any more than that, then that's a bonus, which is even better. And even if you don't achieve those goals, it's important, it's to not be disheartened by that, but it's important to learn from it and say, okay, and reflect on it and say, okay, why wasn't I able to get those 2 calculus modules or chapters done? Maybe in week 9, you had a couple of other deadlines that you had to meet at the same time. So maybe it was unrealistic to have that much to do in that week or something like that. So like I said, it's just important for us to start making expectations that or setting goals that are realistic for us to achieve. Another example is, I will write my history essay. This is another example of a goal that's not SMART because it's not specific enough. A history essay could be 2,000 or 3,000 words, so are you writing the full 2,000 words in between classes, or what are you doing? So it's a bit too vague there. So for example, a more SMART goal is, I will write 150 words of my introduction to my history essay. Let's say, for example, if you had an hour free between classes and you say, I'll write 150 words of my introduction to my history essay between these 2 classes. That is a very SMART goal because you know exactly what's kind of happening in between those 2 classes, what you need to focus on and what you're not focusing on as well, which is also very important. So remember to try and make your goals specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. And like I said, this applies both to longer term goals as well as short term goals. And it can also be applied to goals that you may set outside of academic work as well, even in your everyday life going forward. So just a few suggestions for apps that can help out with time management as well. Some of these can be really, really useful. The first one here is a thing called Life Tick, which can help you set SMART goals, as I've just mentioned there. Definitely check it out if you would like to. The other thing then is around managing distractions. And I appreciate right now with, all of us coming back to campus, but then still having maybe some things online, and then you have to go on the Brightspace and everything. It's very, very easy to find ourselves on the phone or on the laptop, getting lost in, YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is. It's very, very easy to find ourselves in that kind of trap there. And although there's nothing wrong with going onto those sites, The issue is when they actually take up the time that we really want to actually be doing our work or doing something else. So what can be really, really useful is to use an app blocker or a website blocker. And there's a few of these here that are relevant. So the first one is Forest, which I think works on iOS specifically. It might work on Android too, but I know it definitely works on iOS. Another one is called Freedom, and then the last one is called Cold Turkey. And what you can do with these is that it allows you to block certain apps or websites for a certain period of time. So let's say, for example, if you're sitting down to do an hour of work and you don't want to have access to those things, you can block them, and then it means that you can't actually go onto them for that hour. It will unfreeze after the hour that you wanted to, which is great. And I know, I'm not sure about Forest and Freedom, but I know with Cold Turkey, you're actually able to schedule it to block certain apps and websites in advance. So, it's all well and good saying, yeah, I'm going to sit down and block the apps. But when it actually comes to it, it can be very hard to actually go ahead and do that. So in Cold Turkey, you can actually schedule that to happen in advance. So you can say, right, later on today, I have an hour free between these two classes, and I want to be able to focus on this particular task. So right now I'm going to block XYZ apps and websites so that I don't have access to them during that time. And it'll automatically just block them for you during that time. And then it means that you don't have access to it. So it's easier to do the work then a little bit. The other thing then around project management, if you would like to use kind of more of a project management app for all of your deadlines, there's one called My Study Life, and the other one is called Trello. So My Study Life obviously has been specifically set up for college students who have maybe several deadlines at the same time, whereas Trello is more of like you kind of have to build it from scratch for yourself, but you can do different cards and have it kind of set up in different ways. And I suggest you take a look at it because it can be a really, really useful way of managing your time. And then obviously, like I said before, for time management, another one is Google Calendar that you already have access to via UCD. And another one is called O-Waves. O-Waves essentially kind of gives you the same sort of thing as a Google Calendar, but it gives you a much nicer kind of visual aspect of that, kind of like a clock rather than a calendar with all the hours. As some students actually find that far easier to navigate their day when they can kind of see it like as more of like a clock face rather than kind of block by block hours during the day. So just take a look at them and see if any of them do help you out. So just the last few tips then before I let you guys go or ask any questions. Firstly is to try schedule study blocks. And what can be useful is to do a thing called Pomodoro 25-minute blocks. So Pomodoro, I don't know if anyone has heard about this before, but Pomodoro actually means tomato in Italian. You're probably wondering how that relates to scheduling study at all. But the point of it actually is that this gentleman created the term because he had a little kitchen timer that was shaped like a tomato, and he set it for, let's say, 20 minutes or 25 minutes and just focused on one particular task for that 25 minutes. No other distractions, just focusing on that particular task. And, the time went very, very quickly because he was fully engrossed in it and he got the work done that he needed to do. And that's how he ended up inventing the term Pomodoro. So a Pomodoro is where you would set a certain amount of time, let's say on a timer or on your phone or something like that, and do one task during that time. So it might be, for example, reading lecture slides or reading a particular reading for a module or planning out an essay or something like that. And then you take a break afterwards for 5-10 minutes, and you keep doing that during the day, and it allows you to kind of break up, let's say, a bigger study block into kind of smaller and more productive aspects as well. Schedule also a weekly review. And as I said before, it's important to reflect on why things didn't work as well as why they did. And the reason for that is because we learn then from our time, and we learn what works for us and what doesn't work for us. For example, if you look back on your week and say, okay, I'd want to do working on my, let's say my calculus assignment on Wednesday, but then you look back and you realize that actually Wednesday is your busiest day for lectures, and calculus is the hardest module that you're doing at the moment. Maybe actually it wasn't realistic to do that on that day because you were so drained from college, and trying to do a very, very hard task afterwards is very difficult. So maybe saying, okay, well, if that's the case, then I'm going to start scheduling my calculus stuff next week for maybe days that aren't as busy or times that I can spend a little bit more time and have more energy for it. And I'm going to, do something a little bit easier on those days that are harder for me to manage. So as I said, it's not to be disheartened if things don't go exactly how we planned them, but it's important to learn from that so that we can start to adjust things going forward. Also, do try to plan to use your free time. And this is particularly important for students who are in arts and humanities or social science courses. If you have a lot of free time in your schedule, so by that I mean you might have maybe 8 or 10 hours of lectures a week, and then otherwise the time is very much left up for students to decide what they want to do. And then the problem with that is that sometimes when we have too many or not enough structure, it can kind of be hard to know, should I be doing some reading? Should I be doing some assignments? Should I be going to society events? What should I be doing during this time? So that's why it's important each week to think about the week ahead and say, right, what free time do I have after you identified it looking at your weekly schedule? And then saying, okay, what will I plan to do during my free time? Like I said before, it doesn't necessarily need to be planned to the absolute minute, but it's just more so to give you a guide about what you should be doing during each day so that at the end of the day that you feel like it's been a productive one. And that, as I said, can include both academic work and work that's not related to academic stuff. So for example, taking a break and, seeing some friends or playing a video game or whatever it is, but having that kind of intention there on how we use our time can be really, really useful. And then also try wherever possible to use daylight hours. I know the hour is changing next Sunday, which is Halloween. So it is important to try schedule sufficient sleep in your schedule as well. And the reason for this is because, it just gives you a better kind of structure for your day. Getting up at the same time or going to bed at the same time each day is also very, very good for our mental health as well. So it's just to try use the daylight hours wherever we can. So I'm just going to stop recording this here. Give me a second. And if